This is episode 23 of the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I'm Kade, and today I have fellow equine author Joanne Verikios on the show. Joanne is an award-winning author, experienced horse breeder, accomplished equestrian competitor and trainer, Australian representative athlete, trusted health and wellness mentor, and a successful property investor. Joanne is from Queensland, Australia, and grew up with a passion for horses. Her earliest ambition was to be a bareback rider in a circus. Although she never did run off to join the circus, she now has over 50 years of experience working with horses. Beginning with her first pony at the age of 9, Joanne went on to compete with success in gymkhanas, eventing, dressage, hacking, and breed classes, as well as starting her own and other people's horses under saddle. Joanne established and managed the highborn Warmbloods stud farm, where she bred many beautiful horses, including her pride and joy, the licensed Warmblood stallion highborn Powerlifter. The horses Joanne produced went on to win both under saddle and in breed classes, including the Royal Show Championships. Joanne has given back to the equestrian world by officiating on horse sport and breed committees and working as a judge, classifier, and steward at many agricultural warmblood breed shows and equestrian events. She's an honorary life member of the Australian Warmblood Horse Association. A freelance journalist as well as an author, Joanne has had many articles published in a wide range of Australian equine magazines and yearbooks. She was delighted when her critically acclaimed first book, Winning Horsemanship, A Judge's Secrets and Tips for Your Success, won an international award for sports nonfiction. Now, let's get into the interview. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Kade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. Hi everyone, welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight. Today I'm so excited to have fellow author Joanne Verikios on the show with me today. She's coming to us from Australia. Hi Joanne.
G'day, Carly. I should say hi. G'day.
I like Kade. That's perfect. So, I'm so excited to have you on the show today. We've done a lot of communicating back and forth, but it's all been, online and digitally. And this is the first time we're seeing each other and talking to each other. So I'm so excited to meet you and talk a little bit about your world. And I think one of the best places to start is to ask you how your love affair with horses began.
Okay, I think loving horses is something I was actually born doing. It was just with me from the start. I never remember a time when I didn't have a passion for horses. And I would lie in my cot and tell my mother I was thinking about horses. And every chance I got, I would see horses everywhere. You know how when you love something, you see it everywhere. There's a horse. Can I pat that pony? Beg rides, that sort of thing. And when I started to talk, I started to ask for a pony or a horse of my own. And then once I went to school and learned to write, I started writing notes to my parents saying, please buy me a pony or please buy me a horse. And I'd leave them around the house for mum and dad to find, which much has driven them nuts. And then I got really clever with it. And my dad was a pharmacist and had a pharmacy connected to the house. So it was very easy for me to start putting my notes in the pharmacy so I could outsource my pleading to third parties. And his customers would find these notes and I'd hide them under a piece of soap or especially in the veterinary section behind a bottle of liniment or something like that. And eventually it paid off. I think it amused the customers more than annoyed them. But one racehorse trainer said that I could ride his lead pony when it wasn't being used after school. So that was just fabulous for me and a terrific start at having a regular ride, if you like, and someone to just give me a few tips. But the other man came in and said to my father, Trevor, my father's name was Trevor, this is the third note I found this month. Haven't you bought that poor kid a pony yet? Come to my place this weekend, bring your wallet. And so that's how my first pony, Beauty, came into my life. And I was 9 years old and I was just the happiest girl on the planet that day.
Oh, and so inventive. I love the leaving notes behind. So you got your community behind you, and eventually it led you to your first horse, Beauty, or your first pony, Beauty. What a great name too, Beauty. That was like the
Yes,
perfect name. Go ahead.
yeah, she came with that name. A little 12 hands, 3 inches, piebald, fluffy mare.
So cute. We all love our first horses. They're always there with us as we grow older and grow up. And what is so neat about this story is, you know, I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling of just being born with this love of horses. And you know, I used to have a little journal where on road trips, I would write down the number of horses that I saw out the window in pastures and keep track. And, you know, it's just sort of always there with us. It must be a gene or something that they haven't identified yet. But what's really exciting is your adventures with horses, you know, continued on your entire life. And while I was taking a look at your channels and your website and looking into more information about you as I built the questions for our interview today, I found it very interesting that you've actually been a stud manager. And I know that stallions have, you know, quite a reputation. I'm so curious, what was it like being a stud manager, and like, how did you decide that was what you wanted to do? And I'm curious, you know, I imagine it was maybe dangerous at times. I mean, all horses are dangerous, but these are stallions we're talking about here.
These are all very good questions. And like a lot of things that happen in my life, it almost happened by accident, because the horse that became my stallion, who was approved as a licensed and breeding stallion ultimately by the authority involved, I really secretly wanted him to be a filly. It was my first foal. I put my mare in foal to this imported Warmblood stallion. And I had a dream of a bay filly, a big star, and couple of white socks, and that was what I was trying to manifest, you know. And so this colt emerged, and I thought, oh, well, he's beautiful, he's a colt, I suppose I'll geld him. But he was extra special, and from the very beginning he was one of those colts that kind of, you know, I know I'm born to breed, and he was very colty from the beginning. So I thought, well, I'll give him a chance, and if he doesn't pass colt selection, then, you know, he can become my riding gelding. Then, however, he did pass very, very convincingly, shall we say. So I thought, okay, now I'm a stud manager. And from the day he was born, I had to learn with him and from him and fast, because I'd never met a horse with him. And that brings me to the part of your question about what about stallions. The ones that are really stallions and born to be stallions and know it, they have this drive and this sensitivity and this presence, this aura about them that makes them super sensitive. So stallions are just ordinary horses, only more so. You know, so they've got this extra, I guess it's the testosterone, but it's also the awareness. I must think about foals and creating them all the time. And you can work with that to say, no, today we're going to just ride and we're going to a show and there will be no love here for you. So calm down. But it takes a while to get to that point. And luckily he had a wonderful temperament. He's been gone a few years now, but he lived to 28, which is a good age.
That is a great age. I'm sorry for your loss, though. It's when those special horses, you know, it's like the universe, rather than the filly, planted this little colt with you, who you went on to have this amazing relationship with. But it's so hard when we lose them. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, it was very hard. But yes, I think you're right. It was an experience I needed to have, and it's helped me probably help and maybe inspire, some other people. So there were plenty of opportunities where I could have been hurt or killed, but I was careful and, you know, wore helmets and boots and things, and I was also a bit lucky. But lots of stories of how the things that went wrong actually could help to train him as well. So,
and your stallion, he was a Warmblood, is that correct?
Yes.
And this is something else that I found when I was researching you, is that you are a past federal president and federal registrar of the Australian Warmblood Horse Association, and you still continue to serve as a classifier and a classifier trainer, judge trainer, and national assessment tour. I mean, you're doing so much around the Warmblood as a breed. And you were recognized with an honorary life membership. Can you tell us a little bit about how you fell in love with Warmbloods and about your love of this breed? Because I love paint horses, right? It's like it all comes from somewhere. So share with us a little bit about that adventure and your love of Warmblood, the Warmblood horses.
Thinking back, it all comes down to a tiny little book that was maybe this big, called The Observer's Book of Horses and Ponies. And when I was this horse-mad child, my parents appeased my needs with books, first, kids' books, and then more advanced books and a rocking horse. And none of it quite did the trick. But I read this little book from cover to cover so many times and had every breed in the world in it, just a pocket edition. And I've still got it. It's falling apart now. Oh. But if you call that research, from Shetland ponies to Percherons, I decided in my pre-teen brain that Warmbloods were the best horses for what I wanted, which was a riding horse to go show jumping and eventing and dressaging with, and that Tricanas and Hanoverians were my favourite Warmbloods. So there are some other breeds that at the time were quite heavy. They've been refined now. There's a more modern type emerging, but it stems back to that. And so when Powerlifter's mother, my stallion's mother, was a thoroughbred mare, and I selected a Warmblood stallion for her, who happened to be an imported Danish Tricana stallion. And once I was going to produce my very own Warmblood filly, turned into a colt, I became a member of the association and got involved. And I've always had an eye for a horse. I've got a very good sense of their symmetry and how their mechanics work, because a lot of it is physics and mechanics, so that a horse will basically have a long working life if its legs are straighter and shoulders the right angle, this sort of thing. And so I did the training with some Dutch classifiers that we had in Australia at the time, who were great teachers and great characters as well. And then I classified for years, and I was in demand a bit as a judge around local shows and as a commentator at it's a big royal show in Sydney, Sydney Royal, that sort of thing. And I just accumulated more and more experience until finally I was one of the Dutch guys equivalent, and they said, would I start doing the classifier training? So I do.
That's amazing. I mean, it's almost like from reading that book, and horse books are so important. That's why we're doing this here. I mean, look at the impact a horse book had on you. I mean, it was obviously nonfiction talking about the breeds of horses, but it helped you kind of determine your path. It's almost like you knew what path you're going to take from a very young age, which is just so cool. And like you stepped into it and you followed it when it came to your love of horses. And for those that aren't familiar, that are listening to the show today, what does it mean to be a classifier and a classifier trainer when it comes to, your breed of choice, which is the Warmblood breed? What does that mean?
Okay. A little bit of background. The first Warmblood stallions were imported to Australia in the 1970s. And the only mares here there were lots of mares here, obviously, but there were no Warmblood mares. Only the stallions were of the Warmblood descent. So we had thoroughbred mares, stock horse mares. We had some quarter horses and a range of mixed breeds and other horses. So in Europe, they have a very rigorous system, because they decided once horses stopped being used for war and for agriculture that they would purpose breed a riding horse. So they wanted to start selecting for riding horse characteristics, which is an uphill build, a tendency to engage the hindquarters, that sort of thing. And to enforce that, and we're talking, Germany and Europe here, so they can say, all right, your mare isn't suitable for breeding, yours is, geld your stallion, that sort of thing. That was achieved by a classification system where objective trained classifiers would assess horses and say, these are suitable, these aren't, these have faults and should never be mated to a stallion with those faults. You can give a lot of feedback. And when you start to think about translating a system like that to Australia, Australia is a bit like America, a pioneering country, and we're not that keen on authority and being told who we'll breed our horse to. So part of being a classifier is being quite tactful, because you can't make people do things like they could legislate at that time in Europe. But you can seek to educate people, and you can point out nicely that, perhaps their mare isn't the most perfect animal on the planet. But looking at what we started with as the raw material then, and the way the breed has evolved over 30, 40 years now, it's just so exciting, because the horses are world class. The ones produced from locally bred Australian Warmbloods and imported Warmbloods or imported frozen semen are of the same, if not better quality. And it's really exciting and satisfying to have been, a part of bringing that about. So what you have to be able to do is look at a horse standing still, moving, in the case of stallions, and some mare tests free jumping, and you give them scores from 1 to 10, and 1 basically means they don't have a head or they don't have feet, that sort of thing. So you tend not to use that end of the marks, but and then it's calibrated to a final percentage, and that shows where they'll slot into the stud book, into the head stud book, the main stud book, the performance register, that sort of thing. And pedigree comes into it too.
So, there is a breed registrar for the Warmblood, and this classification is part of that, particularly for stallions. Am I getting that right? Or they all can be classified, or just the breeding stock?
Yeah, for me, it's principally for mares and stallions.
Okay. So
the breeding stock, yes. And we have shows and things for geldings, but there's not a lot of point in classifying geldings. But where geldings are great is they're terrific guinea pigs for classifier training. Because if you say, this horse has a beautiful shoulder and a nice hind quarter, however, his hocks could be stronger or something like that, no one's going to really get offended unless the actual breeder of that gelding is there. Whereas if you're talking about a horse that somebody actually wants to put in foal next season, they can be a little more emotional about it.
I can imagine. And so how long did it take you to become a classifier, or how long does the training take in order to be able to judge a horse like that, to judge its quality?
I had a head start because I went through Pony Club and we learned about conformation. And of course, I was a voracious reader, so I have an enormous collection of horse books, and I already knew quite a lot. But the training I did there was a hands-on sort of course and classroom stuff for an intensive weekend. And then I had to shadow a more experienced classifier for a period of time, probably about a year. Your scores are compared to their scores, and you discuss things. And why did you give that? And why didn't you give that? And did you miss that? Or you saw something I didn't see? It's quite constructive. And after a while, they think, okay, you're allowed to be turned loose. But classifiers always work at least in pairs, so that, no one person can make or break a horse's future. And for the colt selections, they're held at usually independent venues, and you have 4 classifiers.
That is so exciting. Thank you for sharing all of that. That's like a whole new, world for me, and maybe, some of the people that will be listening here. And, what's so interesting about this is, like, you have worn, a lot of hats in your lifetime. You're a horse trainer, a breeder, a horse judge and classifier, a former powerlifting champion, which I really want to talk to you about, a retired government official, a world traveler, an author, a speaker, a property investor, and a holistic wellness mentor. So you've worn a lot of hats. Can you tell us a little bit about your career choices and what led you to those things? And, like I mentioned before, I'm especially interested in hearing a little bit about your adventures in powerlifting. I mean, that that's just like, woo, right over my head. And tell us, how did this occur?
Uh, okay. Well, I've never been really ambitious, apart from knowing I wanted a life with horses. Nothing, I didn't grow up wanting to be an author, for instance, or a public servant, certainly not a public servant. So I kind of fell into things. I studied Russian at university because I liked vodka and balalaika music, and it seemed like a good idea at the time, but that's not exactly vocational training. So when I started applying for jobs when I finished university, some of my friends were going into the public service. I thought, well, that'll do until I find something I really want to do. Mm-hmm. But the public service sounds boring but it's actually, it offers a lot. And 32 years later, I thought it's time to leave and do something else. But that time, it went really quickly. And of course, I was working with my horses and doing the powerlifting, and it funded, setting up a horse stud and that sort of thing. So I can't complain, but it took me to all around Australia and most of the continents of the world. And I even got to go to Antarctica for work and be paid for it. So pardon the pun, but how cool was that?
Yes, that's very cool. And I think that you shared something very interesting with me about being in Antarctica. You were which number of women to ever set foot on the continent?
Yes, the 8th Australian woman. So it was early days, back in the early 80s.
And that's really exciting. So if you don't mind, what were you doing in public service? Like, what was, kind of your job? What did you focus on?
Well, over 32 years, there were lots of jobs.
I'm sure.
You could largely categorize it as analytical work and management and leadership work, because let's say I won't say the older I got, the more mature I got and was promoted, I had more managerial and leadership roles, so less hands-on work. But back in the Antarctic time, it was the government, the Australian government, has a sector of Antarctica and called the Australian Antarctic Territory, with 3 bases there. And you have to resupply the bases, and they have to be resupplied basically for logistic reasons by sea. There's some air transport now, but it was by sea then. Mm-hmm. And we would hire ships from Denmark. So in the northern summer, the ships would work the Arctic. Mm-hmm. And then in the southern summer, when they couldn't operate in the Arctic, they would come down to work the southern summer in the Antarctic for Australia. And then the government decided, well, we really should, or they were advised, we should build our own ice-breaking marine science resupply vessel, passenger transfer vessel. And so my job was one of the team writing submissions to the government to say, we think this is the sort of vessel you should build, and these are its parameters and specifications. And it was very interesting. Again, something I kind of fell into because I had no experience as an engineer or anything else. And because of the work I was doing, the powers that be said, well, really, you'd be more useful if you actually went to Antarctica and did some marine research and travelled with the expeditioners there and back and saw how the ships work in terms of, the laboratories and the accommodation. I said, I'll twist my arm. And it was tremendous.
How neat is that? I love hearing these stories of, people just kind of following the path that appears for them and winding up, enjoying what they're doing. It's like, and I love when you say that you were not particularly motivated, because look at all of the things that you've done. It's like hard for me to even envision that, because you've had your hands in so many different cookie jars, and it's been so exciting and always full of horses. Like, everything that you've done has enabled you to continue having horses in your life. So I wanted to circle back to powerlifting. Now, how does a woman end up deciding she wants to be a competitive powerlifter?
A lot of women probably do it differently from me, but it came about in 1985 when my stallion powerlifter's mother was in foal with him. And when she was about 6 months in foal, there was no real reason for me to stop riding her, but I didn't want to compete or train her as hard. So I thought I won't ride her for the rest of the pregnancy. She can just enjoy herself bucking around the paddock and being a mum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had all this energy and needed something to do. And I thought, well, I'll go to the gym. I'll get fitter. It'll be fun, keep me occupied for a few months till the foal is born. And so I started going to a gym. And one of the managers of the gym noticed me after a while. And she said, "You're very strong." I think probably all those years of, lumping bags of horse feed and carrying buckets of water had helped.
Sure.
She said, "Why don't you go in a powerlifting competition?" I'd never heard of this sport. And I said, "What's powerlifting?" So she explained the lifts, and which are, to anticipate a question you might ask, the squat, bench press, and deadlift. So it's 3 kind of brute strength, low technique. There is technique, but it's not as important as in some other forms of strength sports. So she said, "There is a powerlifting competition this weekend, by the way." This is after she'd shown me the 3rd lift. And I said, "Oh, okay, and what do I have to do?" "Well, you just turn up and you could wear a leotard and those shoes are all right and pay, I don't know, $5. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll do this. So I went. It was an amazing subculture. I just was blown away by powerlifters because I'd never really been conscious of them before. There were some in the gym that I knew, but I didn't know what they were training for. So at this competition, I broke all the local records and I narrowly missed qualifying for the upcoming national championships. So I thought, oh, perhaps I should concentrate on this for a little while.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so you went on and you you had all the success in the first one you attended, and then you kept on doing this. And I have to ask, did the powerlifting inspire your stallion's name, or was he already a powerlifter coming out and then it kind of guided you towards powerlifting?
No, he wasn't born until maybe a few months after I started powerlifting. So because he was a big, strong creature and because I was getting quite passionate about powerlifting at that stage, powerlifter seemed the perfect name for him. But yeah, it was a strange and brief career in powerlifting, but I did really well. I ended up being a national champion. I represented Australia twice at World Championships, got ranked 7th in the world twice, and I had state, national, Commonwealth records. And then in 1988, I retired and got back more fully into horses because by then powerlifter was ready to start working with him.
That is just really cool. Like it's like I've never heard a story quite like that. And I see you and yes, we're strong. Equestrians are very strong, but women we have to lift things that we don't think we can lift, and bales of hay and shavings. But I look at you and I'm like, wow, she can lift something that big or could. That's just incredible because you look like, just an average, beautiful woman.
Thank you, Carly. Yeah, I mean, you do compete in a weight category. And so my weight division was under 48 kilos, women's division. And what's that in pounds? About 105 pounds?
Yeah, I think.
So, but my best lift ever, I did really get very strong when I started training and concentrating. I lifted in a competition, so it's all witnessed, 155 kilograms, weighing 47 kilos. So it's more than triple body weight. And I think, how much is that in pounds?
We need a little.
Anyway, you can do the maths. Yeah, it's 300, over 300 pounds, I think.
That's amazing. And, obviously you have to take care of yourself when you're lifting weight that heavy. So I imagine, that kind of maybe spurred you a little bit into the holistic wellness side of what you're up to too, I would imagine.
A little bit, yes. That's actually a good insight. It sparked the interest, but back then when I was doing it, there wasn't the emphasis on wellness and taking supplements as much. Like my coach was always encouraging me to eat freeze-dried liver tablets and take a multi. Yes, they're not as bad as they sound, but because you just swallow them, but yuck.
For sure.
More protein. I needed more protein.
Does not sound yummy. Speaking of holistic wellness, I love that you have the salt lamp behind you. I have one of those in my office too. So those of you not watching us on YouTube, it's a Himalayan salt rock. Is that what it is back there? I have one in my office too. I love mine. So we have that in common. Not only that, but our love of horses.
Yeah, they're good things.
They're great. I always have mine on when I'm working in my office. So, all of this, is kind of like, preemptive to, getting to now, in your life, you still work with horses. Horses are still a very, very important part. You've had all these different hats of careers that you've taken on, but now you are also an author. So I would love it if you would tell us about your book, Winning Horsemanship, A Judge's Secrets and Tips for Your Success. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and why you decided to write this book?
Okay. Thank you for asking.
Of course.
So here's my book. Is that high enough on the screen? Yes. And that is actually me on the cover, but it's a stock photo horse chosen by the publisher, just in terms of full disclosure. But my book's part memoir, it's part education, it's part self-help. And I wrote it mainly for the growing number of horse owners who have achieved their dream of horse ownership, shall we say, a bit later in life, once they have left the family home, they've got their own money, and their parents didn't buy them the pony that I was so lucky that mine did. And also they probably didn't grow up around horses like I did, and with the old timers who were very experienced, not at teaching you how to relate to horses, but showing you how horses work, and just with comments and gestures and how they relate to horses, showing you how horses work and what works the best. And it's, I feel really lucky that I had those childhood experiences. At the time, I just took them for granted, and all I wanted to do was be with ponies. But I look back and thought, I learned so much, and I owe so much to so many books and so many teachers, and also people who weren't so hot at horsemanship. You learn what not to do as well, and what doesn't work. So with my judging, the Australian Warmblood Horse Association has this fabulous event, a national tour, national judging and classification tour. Oh. And they have usually an Australian judge and a judge from somewhere else in the world who is a very well-known horse person. And the judges travel, because Australia is such a big country, they travel to the horses. So instead of bringing all the Warmbloods in Australia to Sydney or Brisbane or somewhere like that, which is not feasible because of the distances you would have to travel, and for mares and foals and things, the judges do a circuit, a month-long circuit, where they start in one capital city, they fly to another one, they get driven to the studs, and sometimes to big venues where all the horses come, but often just, to where there are a couple of mares and foals, not classify them, judge them, but with this objective standard, and the scores are then fed into a database. So at the end of the whole tour, you have state winners, you have national winners. Mm-hmm. It's great. But anyway, so I went all around Australia a few times doing this, and I would see people who had beautiful horses, and they're beautiful people, but they would be frustrated because their horse would play up in the arena and they couldn't really do anything about it, or the horse would spook at a flag or something and they couldn't really stop it and they didn't really know how, or the horse would get ahead of them when they were leading it at the trot and they would be close to being kicked, if the horse wasn't a nice soul. And I thought, I can help them if they would read my book. If I wrote a book distilling some of the things I know, not only about horses, but about self-development, because powerlifting taught me a hell of a lot about competition nerves. Going to world championships, I was a wreck at my first world championships. I was so nervous and I could have performed much better. So getting a hold of your own emotions is important too, because as you know, the horses pick up on that so quickly. So that's why I wrote the book.
That's so cool. I mean, and horses, I'm sure you combine this, but like horses can be one of the biggest reflections of ourselves and what's going on with us. And in order to communicate with them, often it's like happening over here with the person, and they're just feeding off of our vibes. One of the things your website says, Winning Horsemanship is fundamentally a self-help book, because through helping ourselves, we are better placed to be able to relate to our horses in a kinder, calmer, holistic way. I would love to hear just a little bit more about your philosophy on relating to horses in a kinder, calmer, holistic way. Like, what is your philosophy? I obviously read Joanne's book, because that's where you're going to get all the nitty gritty. But can you give us a little teaser about your view and where that comes from, and what people will find when they read the book?
Certainly, yes. I think it again comes back to how I've always felt about horses. I wanted a horse as a partner, a willing, happy partner. I wanted the horse to be free of pain when we were having fun together. And not all horsemanship paths steer you in that direction, but it's always been at the base of my desire, I suppose. Another really influential book I read when I came to the point of having young horses and the decision, do you send them to somewhere to be broken in? Or I read this book called The Gentle Art of Horse Breaking. And I loved the title, and I thought, this sounds like what I want. And it was tremendous. And I used that with Powerlifter's Mother and with Powerlifter and with other people's horses that I would start under saddle. And it was also uneventful, there was no kind of yeehaw, sit loose and rattle stuff. Sometimes the horses would spook or react, but it eliminated so much of it because they understood what you wanted from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And that you weren't going to hurt them. And even if you were above them or on them or something like that, it was a pleasurable, safe experience. And I thought, well, that's how it should be. And then, I learned a lot over the years, as I mentioned, from different instructors through Pony Club. Had some great Pony Club instructors. And I would also go to clinics with, he's an Olympic rider, they're having a clinic, go and learn how to ride jumps or that sort of thing. And when Powerlifter was occasionally with stallions, going back to stallions, you will say something to a stallion and draw a line in the sand, and the stallion will very happily just rub it out again and say, was there a line there? I don't see a line. And then you reassert your line, they rub it out. So I was having some as much mind game battles with him as anything. But Pat Pirelli started coming to Australia, and he's, as you probably know, an American, one of the forerunners of promoting the natural horsemanship movement, not creating it. And I went and audited one of Pat's clinics. I thought, yes, I need to get this guy together with my horse. So I brought Pat to where I was living for a couple of clinics over a couple of years, and also went to others, and that turned things around tremendously. And another person who helped me a lot with Powerlifter was Buck Brannaman, on whom the book The Horse Whisperer is based. Another lovely man. And through them I learned about Tom Dorrance, whose book I have, and Ray Hunt, who's also written books that I have. And I had then got reinterested in the Australian forerunners of this kind of movement, because there are quite a few. There was Tom Roberts and J.D. Wilton and Morris Wright, and all that sort of thing gelled into my philosophy and how it should all work for the good of the horse.
And also the good of the person, right? Because you address things that are going on with the person. Yeah. So you did your research. So this is a culmination of all of your experiences with horses, being a judge, working with these natural horsemanship stars, I guess, if you want to say it that way. So it brought it all together into your philosophy with your book. So how do you reach your readers? How do you share with your readers this this wonderful book that you've written, and how do you get the word out about winning horsemanship? What do you do anything special to get the word out? How do you do that?
I probably don't do anything special. Like I've learned a lot from you too, Carly, even though you're in the fiction space and I'm in the non-fiction space. I watch what you do and I'm in awe with the wonderful way you promote your books and reach out to your readers and stay in touch.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for that feedback. It's nice to hear somebody notices on the other side. I really appreciate that.
No,
Well, and you're always so fantastic about sharing feedback and liking posts and letting me know you're there. That's actually how we connected, so it's a great community. We're all taking care of each other. We're all uniting and supporting each other. And that's the goal, right? Talk to each other and learn from each other and figure out new ways to reach our readers and put a bright spotlight on the fabulous people behind all the horse books that are available in the world and all the people that love them, right? So, again, yes. Thank you for your gift. You're being on the show and sharing with us your vast knowledge of your world of horses and what you're up to. So, back to the question, how do you reach your readers? I imagine you've got, different ways that you do it than I do. So I'd love to hear some of your ideas or ways you do it.
I do know a lot of my readers personally through the Warmblood Association because I've met them on tour and through classifying and working with them on committees and that sort of thing. And I also know quite a lot of people in the eventing world and other areas where I used to compete. And then I do normal things like I have a Facebook account and other social media accounts. And I not only have my own page and promote that, but I like to join. I'm a member of a number of groups, and where I can or where it's relevant, I will insert a comment that I think might help people, and I always have the door open for people to, if they want, contact me directly, take it offline. I'm happy to do that. And I have a couple of blogs on my website, and one of them is more articles, and one I'd like to create these original memes and sayings and stuff like that. So I have that as well, and then I share some of those things through Goodreads and Amazon author page. What else do I do? That's about it. And when I first launched the book, I did some speaking at various events. That's tapered off now because my book came out in 2016. It's probably time I wrote another one.
Well, we're looking forward to that. And you said something really interesting because it's like you talk about the people that you know, and that is always like the very best place to start, because you obviously have a reputation being a judge and being a classifier and working with the breed the way you do and being a commentary at these important horse shows. So you start, starting there with your community and talking to them about the book that you gave birth to. I like to call them book babies, so talking to your community, and it's the right demographic. It's the horse community. That word of mouth can help generate and spread the news around. So it's always starting with who those are your people, and then they share, and then it kind of spreads out from there. Would you agree with that?
Yes. And you've reminded me, I also sporadically have a newsletter. I have a mailing list and a newsletter, and no one can ever accuse me of emailing them too often. So I aspire to be as regular and as entertaining as you are with yours.
Oh, thank you for reading my newsletter. I try. Well, that's why I committed to once a month sending out my newsletter, just to kind of, touch my readers and let them know what I'm up to, but not overwhelm them either. So I felt like once a month was something I could definitely commit to. And that's something that's so important as an author is, you choose which social media channels work for you, that you have the time for, choose a rhythm that you can get into with your newsletter that you think you can commit to, right? Because we start piling on so much that there isn't enough time to getting that next book written. So talk to us a little bit about, I know that you worked with a traditional publisher on publishing this book. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your experience was working with a traditional publisher on this book? And did you pitch them, or did they come to you? How did that work for you? And why did you decide to go to the traditional route?
Okay. It was great working with the traditional publisher. Really good experience. And if I write another book, I might do the self-publishing thing. We'll come to that. The publisher I worked with has a really, I don't know if it's a unique model, but an interesting model where you can pitch them, they can pitch you, or you can work together. So we had a conversation and decided, yes, we would like to work together. And so then they took over all the normal publishing things, except they didn't give me an advance and they didn't distribute the book themselves. They got me a distribution contract. But in other respects, they designed the cover. And that was one of the very first things I had to do, was sign off on the cover, which surprised me. I thought, don't you write the book first and then do the cover? No, with them. You did the front of the cover, the back of the cover, the spine of the cover. And I learned, it was great because I learned how important these different bits of real estate on your book are. Mm-hmm. And so they provided a design after some consultation with what sorts of covers I liked. It was interesting. They said, send us some pictures of the book covers that you like. So I went through the bookshelf and photographed about 3 or 4, sent them, and then they used the similar font and similar colors and adapted it to what I was doing.
So you worked with them, you showed them what you like for your cover design, which is really cool. So you had some creative say in how your cover turned out, but you also decided that you were going to work together on the project. So how did it go after you designed the cover? I mean, you had to work on a deadline. How did that work?
So we agreed on a 12-month deadline from I will write this book to it's going to be in my driveway in boxes and other people's driveway in boxes. And they sent me a little, I suppose, a cheat sheet of milestones I had to hit at different times along the way, just to keep me honest. And of course, they provided an editor and a proofreader. And my goal, because I do like to write and think I write fairly accurately, my goal was to give these people nothing to do, but they still found things, and it was really valuable. Their input was really valuable, and their comments were really valuable. And the other thing that the publisher encouraged me to do, and which I happily did after I got over the horror of actually sharing my manuscript with someone, was to send it to some experienced horse people that are friends of mine and said, would you mind reading this, please? And they did, and they provided some really good feedback too. So then I was able to tweak it and edit it. And it went between me and the publisher a few times, and then they had it all typeset. And they did good stuff. They typeset it also for ebooks, so I didn't have to worry about any of the formatting. And they sourced, I provide a lot of original photos for the book, but they sourced some others with their license, royalty-free images that I could use, which was good. They gave me some sites, said pick what you want from these. So I did have a lot of input, and I wanted it to have illustrations because a picture tells 1,000 words, but it's also, when I read books, I always have a bit of a look through if it's someone's life story or something, see if there are photos, and I enjoy just getting to know the person a bit more. So I wanted just to give a bit of an indication who I am and why I wrote the book, and with the horses in my life. So, what you can't tell from just one picture what someone's journey has been.
I totally agree with you. And what I love about this conversation is that you've always been a lover of horse books, and your love of horse books is actually helping you design and write your own horse book, right? Because you took pictures of covers of horse books that you liked and you shared them with your publisher. You like to see and know the journey of someone with lots of illustrations inside the book if it's someone's own personal journey, and you're following what you liked, but what other people had done that you liked, and that led to this beautiful design of your book. You mentioned with the traditional publisher that they did not give you an advance. Can you talk a little bit about why, or how did that work? So was your revenue from book sales split with them, and that just book by book sales, how it worked, and that's why you didn't do the advance? Can you talk a little bit about that?
The distribution contract they arranged, the distributor would then pay me for books that were sold, both in bookstores and online. And the other part of my arrangement was that I could also sell them through my website, which you can't always do, if you're John Grisham or something. So that was good for me because I wanted to be able to do that. I wasn't allowed to sell them in certain other places like eBay, that sort of thing. But the sad part is that the distributor, after a year or so, went into liquidation and was wound up. And so here was I with no distribution, no income, and also my sites on Amazon and Kobo and that sort of thing went down as well. It took a while to retrieve, but the publisher leapt into the breach and actually they're now my distributor. And so that's all working again, and it's working better actually because they're better at communicating than the original distributor was, and they send me monthly statements, and it's good. So I'm grateful to them for setting up the first deal, which seemed good at the time. I mean, you just can't foresee that. And of course, I wasn't the only author affected, and I know a lot of people who, lost quite a lot as a result, not to mention the poor distributors who went to the wall.
Oh, and that's very frightening. And that's something as an author that you have to be aware can happen. You are not the only one that I've interviewed on this podcast so far that's had something similar to that happening, where, either a publisher or a distributor or someone that you've agreed to sell your book through has gone under and taken the books with them when that happens, and so because that happened to you, you said that you're kind of interested in exploring what independent publishing would look like, to retain a little bit more control of what happens to your books. Is that correct?
Yes, I think it's the internet, and it's becoming easier and easier, and there's a lot of information now about how to do it, and there's all those, I haven't tried them, but there's software that formats it and that sort of thing, which was, and to be honest, Kade, I really didn't have the time to self-publish back when I wrote my book anyway. So this cooperative model was great for me.
Mm-hmm. And there's pros and cons to both. I mean, it's like you got to do what is right for you, because independent publishing is a lot of work. And if you should decide to dip your toe in the pond, please do get a hold of me. I'd be happy to, coach you through some of the things that have and have not worked for me, because we, again, authors unite, we take care of each other. But I think, that's part of the thing to be aware of as an author, is that, you can't put all your eggs in one basket or on any one platform, because you never know when, Amazon may stop distributing books. You want to be able to try and have your books out there in as many places as you can, and also have the power to sell them through your own website. Actually, that's where authors generally make the most money from their book sales. And we do not make a lot of money from our book sales, but they're, selling them through author events or our own websites is generally where authors see the most proceeds from their creative endeavors. Is that what you've discovered?
Absolutely true. And first of all, thank you for that very kind offer. You will be the first. That's lovely. But yes, as my publisher said to me, having it in the bookstore is good for credibility. Having it on the website is where you sell your books, and especially having a list and marketing to the list and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a lot of marketing does fall to the author in order to keep things relevant and alive and in front of people. It's like, if you don't do anything, there's so many books out there that people don't see your book, so you have to make the effort to put it out there, and it's time consuming. But there's different strategies to make it not as difficult as it sounds. Enormous when you think of the whole picture, but when you take little baby steps, it's a lot easier. So given that unfortunate circumstance happened to you with your distributor, what advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time before you published this first book, what would you tell yourself?
You touched on it, and I would get a lot more savvy about marketing a book myself. Because we have control. I had control. I could have done more. I read another book. This is an ebook this time by a woman called Joanne Penn.
I love her.
She has a tremendous website and very helpful. But this book was called How to Market a Book, which I bought after I had written my book and it was out there. And then I didn't read it, and I read it a couple of months ago. I thought, oh, this is gold. Why didn't I read this? But some of the things in it are still relevant. And as you say, baby steps, I think, well, I'll take that little strategy this month and do this or try that. But yes, when I do it again, I will be much better equipped, and I will consider self-publishing. And there's all sorts of tactics and techniques for pre-sales, which I didn't do, and to generate numbers. And maybe like my book won an award, which was wonderful, for sports nonfiction, but it's not a bestseller. And there are ways you can encourage people to buy your book by getting it in front of them and make it a bestseller. So
there's lots of strategies, lots of opportunity for marketing, and some of it works and some of it doesn't. But book awards definitely work. Can you tell us a little bit about the award your book won? That's so exciting.
Yeah, thank you. It was through an international competition run by Reader's Favourite, and you enter your book and you tell people a bit what it's about. You have to provide several copies of the book, and they read it, and they will provide you with a review of it. And mine came back with a 5-star review well before the competition was concluded, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will win anything. But fortunately it did, and so I've got this little green seal that I can now put on the cover saying that it's a book award winner, and that's very cool.
Well, that's very special, particularly on your first book. That should be encouragement right there for you to continue writing this series that you have imagined for yourself. And I'm sure your readers would love to see more books too, right?
I hope so. And I have to express a little bit of gratitude here, because it was another author who said to me, you should enter your book in this competition. And I said to him, what about your book? He said, no, mine's not really so suitable. His is about internet strategies and things like that. But he said, I think yours would do very well. So gratitude to Mark for that.
Oh, and that's wonderful. And see, that's what our community does for each other. We share the knowledge, we let each other know, we encourage each other when we need to be encouraged. And, we're here for each other. We always say we're not each other's competition. When we stand together, we're stronger. And, that's a clear example right there of one author taking care of and uplifting another author. And I totally love hearing stories like that. So in your adventures so far, can you share with us, this is a question I'm always interested to hear from authors, what has been the hardest part for you being an author? And then on the flip side of that, what is the very best part of being an author?
You mean apart from answering hard questions like this, Kade?
I'm here to get it out of you.
Yeah, challenge me. On the hard part, I'd have to say it was getting out of my own way to actually write the book. I know I'm not alone in thinking one day I'll write a book. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to actually say, all right, today I'm going to put the first word down on paper of this book, because you think, who am I to write a book? So you've got to say, who are you not to write a book, and why do you want to write this book? And so once I'd overcome the hurdle and committed to the deadline, because I respond very well to deadlines. I had my 12-month deadline. I had my publisher. That probably helped me a lot more than if I'd been a self-publisher too, because there was no escape. Mm. And, being a woman of my word and having this honor to fulfill, I was going to deliver a book after 12 months, come hell or high water. But the best part is the people I've been able to help and touch through the book. And I aim to inspire and educate and entertain. and provide a better deal for horses and the people who love them. And when someone says to me, I read your book and I got this out of it or that out of it, or, it's my go-to reference when I'm training diamond, or my heart melts. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's so lovely. And that's the best feeling. And I totally associate with what you said on both sides of that hard question I asked. It's the who am I to write this, right? And getting out of your own way. But then on the other side, it's like once you put that creative effort out there and you complete that book, then you touch people, and there's nothing more special than having someone say that your book inspired them, helped them, provided them escape, any of those things. So that was a great response. So we're getting towards the end of the interview right now. I have one more question for you. What are you curious about right now? Where's Joanne heading? What's next for you?
Well, interestingly, I had the wonderful opportunity of being art director for a short film a few months ago. And I had no experience with film, and it was fascinating to watch the crew assemble to do the shoot, that sort of thing. But I guess now I'm curious about storytelling through film and possibly even writing a screenplay or getting involved in that way. So that's what I'm exploring right now at the back of my brain, which might lead to another hat next time we talk.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say you're about to add another hat to your pile. And when you take that route and explore more about film and screenwriting, I would love to have you back on the podcast to talk about that adventure and your new discoveries with that, because I believe you're going to step into that because that's what's calling you forward. And you've done that so well, with what you've shared with us your entire life. Like something shows up and you step into it and it offers you all this opportunity. So I can't wait to see what you do in the world of film and screenwriting.
Thank you. Yeah, watch this space.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I'd love to learn what you learn through that and share it with people who are listening to the podcast. So, Joanne, I wanted to say thank you so much for the gift of your time today. And thank you for sharing all this valuable information and sharing with us about your book. Would you let listeners know where they can find you and your books? I'll of course link to this in the show notes so people don't have to memorize it, but please do let us know where we can find you and your books.
Okay, thank you. And Carly, likewise, thanks. It's been terrific talking with you and tremendous to meet you in person, because I've been following you for a long time. And as you said, we met online, and I love your Authors Unite philosophy, and I'm very grateful for that. My book, the easiest place to find it is at my website, which is very simply called Winning Horsemanship, one word, .com. So www.winninghorsemanship.com. And I'm also on Facebook, but if anybody looks for my name, I've got a fairly solid internet footprint now. So I'm easy to find: Facebook, Instagram, the usual places. So I'll let people look at your links, but the website is the go-to place.
Of course. And I will also link to where you can buy your very own copy of Winning Horsemanship. Of course, buying it from the author is the best place to do so she makes a little extra money. But Joanne, I appreciate you being on the call with me today and dialing in and speaking to us all the way from Australia. And I wish you so much continued success. And thank you for being a part of this Authors Unite story, because you very much are a part of it, and being here today is a part of it, and reaching out and helping fellow authors is a part of it, and just writing your books is a part of it. So thank you for everything you're doing for humans and horses. I wish you the best.
Thank you very much, Carly. It's been fun and an honor and a privilege. I love what you're doing, though. I think this series, and I've listened to not all but some of them, it's great, and it's really nice the way you're giving people a showcase, but I love the breadth of experience that the authors have as well.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlykadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlykadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlykadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Kade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.